Nō mai, haere mai. Welcome. I'm Bruce Munro, and with me is International Relations Specialist, Professor Robert Patman. And this is Global Insight. 2 years ago, few would have predicted that by late 2025, the United States would be the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council not to recognise a Palestinian state. How is the Israel-Hamas war changing the world? Welcome, Robert.
Morena, Bruce.
So where is the Israel-Hamas conflict up to?
Well, we're in a situation now where the Israeli government, led by Mr. Netanyahu, are considering a ceasefire proposal tabled by Qatar and also supported by Egypt. Hamas have accepted it. What is the ceasefire proposal? It's a 60-day ceasefire in which half of the hostages, there's 50 hostages still within Hamas's control. 20 of those are alive. The rest, unfortunately, have deceased. And they're talking about releasing half the hostages. And the idea is that if the deal is signed and it goes through, it will pave the way for a second phase deal, which would lead to an end of the war and the release of all the hostages.
Right. And so where is US President Donald Trump where does he sit on all of this?
Well, I think he's supporting Mr. Netanyahu's position. One of the things that's made this ceasefire proposal, and they've all been very important given the appalling, catastrophic situation in Gaza. But one thing that's really raised the temperature has been Mr. Netanyahu's military offensive on Gaza City, where 1 million people live, and they've begun that offensive already. So that has probably, if you like, added to the urgency of the mediation effort, because even on the Israeli side, they concede that many Palestinian civilians will be killed in that very densely populated area of Gaza City. I mean, the whole Gaza Strip is densely populated, but the Gaza City is a city with what's left of it, 1 million people. So it'll be very difficult, with the best will in the world, not to kill civilians using military weapons in a suburban environment. So that's lent urgency to the situation.
New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has recently called Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he has lost the plot. And this week, the Australian Immigration Minister told the Israeli government, and let me quote, "Strength is not measured by how many people you can blow up or how many children you can leave hungry." It seems that an increasing number of countries, including New Zealand and Australia, are treating the Netanyahu government as though he and it are now beyond the pale. If it has lost international respect, what is its future?
Well, that future will depend both on the response of other countries as well as domestic opinion within Israel. The response of other countries, we're seeing, as you've intimated, a growing number of countries which had previously been sympathetic to Israel begin to distance themselves. Our country included. You just quoted the Prime Minister, and also Prime Minister Albanese, who's now on the receiving end of some pretty strong rhetoric from Netanyahu saying Australia's abandoned Israel, something which Australia vehemently denies. But what we're seeing is a growing number of countries which have pledged at the next UN General Assembly to recognise Palestine as a state. Now, that means more than 150 countries around the world will have recognised Palestinians as a state. When you think there's only 193 members of the UN, you realise that would seem to shadow or foreshadow the possible isolation of Israel and the United States, its close ally. But it's not just recognition of a Palestinian state that Mr. Netanyahu has to worry about. He also has to worry about the sort of measures that could follow. The curtailment of diplomatic links, the suspension of trade, the cutting off of arms support. Many of these countries which are considering recognising Israel, Australia, Germany, UK, have all provided either intelligence or military support for Netanyahu's campaign of, quote, mighty vengeance in Gaza that's now gone on for 22 months. All those steps could seriously compromise not only would contribute to the growing isolation of Israel, but would seriously undermine its viability as a state. Remember, Israel is a country of 10 million people. The domestic opinion is also a crucial dimension here in answering your question. We saw last Sunday the largest demonstrations Israel has experienced during the 22-day war. Huge street protests. In Tel Aviv alone, there was more than 500,000 people protesting, and there was probably an estimated 500,000 protesting up and down Israel outside Tel Aviv. So many people said there was about 1 million people on the streets protesting against what they call the war in Gaza. And it seems to me that the two key demands for the domestic protesters. One is they'd like to see the war suspended, but secondly, they want to see all the hostages brought home through a deal. Now, Hamas has always indicated they would release all the hostages in return for an end of the war, but that's been unacceptable to Mr. Netanyahu because his goal is to support the obliteration of Hamas. And that's a position, coming back to your previous question, that Mr. Trump continues to support. The problem is, even if you obliterate Hamas, would that make Israel more secure?
Does this mean that Hamas will feel that they are winning, that they are getting what they want?
I would disagree with the assumption in the question that Hamas represent all Palestinians. People are recognising the right of the Palestinians to have self-determination, partly because of the suffering they perceive of Palestinians who have nothing to do with Hamas. Let's remember, more than 62,000 Palestinians have died in this conflict in Gaza, many of whom have no connection with Hamas. 20,000 children have been killed since the 7th of October. The Israelis would say that it's the unfortunate, unintended victims of a conflict against Hamas. But others believe that Israel has not been precise enough. It's carried out collective punishment, in other words. So Hamas, their vision is not the two-state solution. It's one Islamist state. But that vision is not shared by many Palestinians. If you want to undermine Hamas, the best way to do so is to create a peaceful pathway for the Palestinians to achieve their national right of self-determination. And so, in a sense, it's an irony that Netanyahu's constant targeting of Hamas since the 7th of October has actually politically strengthened Hamas. It hasn't. It's militarily weakened it. Because without that prospect of a Palestinian state, many Palestinians will, under attack, rally behind Hamas. So we need to provide a pathway for Palestinians to achieve a state, and that will hopefully defang the influence of Hamas. Hamas was created out of Israeli occupation in 1987. And it derives its legitimacy by presenting itself as resisting an illegal Israeli occupation. If the illegal Israeli occupation was removed and the Palestinians had the right to form a state based on East Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank, that will be a significant blow to Hamas. And although it sounds very remote at the moment, it will take courage and leadership to achieve that outcome internationally. That they're in short supply at the moment. But I do think it's important to make that distinction between people's recognition of the Palestinians' right to self-determination and to form a state, and also that is not boosting Hamas in the process. I think it's the reverse, actually.
Right. And so summing all of this up then, how has the Israeli-Hamas war changed the world? how will it change the world?
It's always difficult to know with certainty exactly what will follow when we're in the process of witnessing an appalling event unfold. I think what we've witnessed is a fork in the road moment for the 21st century. And that's not to diminish all the other crises we've seen around the world in Sudan, in Ukraine. I think what is really striking about this crisis, though, is that the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice have served, either given strong legal advice about what's happening or served arrest warrants in the case of Israel. I mean, Netanyahu and his former defence minister have arrest warrants. So it's an extremely grave situation. Humanitarian laws, war crimes, and the use of food as a weapon have become commonplace, unfortunately, in Gaza. So what is striking about this in global terms is it's been, on the one hand, an appalling humanitarian tragedy with much of the world looking on. On the other hand, and here's the paradox, the Palestinians have, in a sense, popularised their claim for the right to political self-determination. In other words, there's never been more international support for the right of the Palestinians to fulfil their right under the UN Charter to pursue the right of political self-determination, in other words, have a state. And that's something that's been denied to them throughout the post-45 period. But it's come at a terrible cost. And so that's one side of it. But on the other side, I think, is that we have to say that one of the biggest question marks that must be raised in global terms is the role of the UN Security Council. Once again, it has failed. What is its role? Its role is to uphold peace and security. It's, if you like, it's been to be the ultimate barrier to war. Once again, it's failed because 5 members have a veto privilege, and the US on this occasion has exercised that privilege to prevent a ceasefire and perpetuate the war at huge cost to civilians in the region. So I think this conflict has basically underlined the necessity for urgent reform of the UN. And I would hope it lends new impetus to it. But of course, all this speculation is contingent on how this war ends, how this conflict ends. Will it end through a shaky ceasefire and the Israelis effectively cutting back or disengaging from Gaza, or will it end through the forcible eviction of Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank? They are also claiming sovereignty over the West Bank. They said they will impose sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty, over both the West Bank and Gaza in the course of 2025. If that outcome happens, we could be looking at renewed worsening insecurity, because if 6 million or even a sizable number of Palestinians are displaced from those territories where they live, that will have regional reverberations and repercussions, I should say. And the other thing here to note is, if we don't move on UN reform, if we don't make the UN more effective barrier to conflict, then I think, and this will be very sobering news for New Zealanders, we can look forward, or rather anticipate, a future in which an international relations based on rules, principles, laws continues to unravel. In other words, we'll get more of the same if we do not have more effective institutions, which are not the plaything of 5 countries. At the moment, questions of war and peace rest on, for the whole planet, rest on the shoulders of 5 countries. And for the rest, that's probably unacceptable, but they have to exercise their agency in trying to change that situation.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you for watching. Catch us next time on Global Insight. Noho ora mai.